Today, we're going to be speaking with Jeffrey Mandell, who's president and lead counsel at Law Forward, the firm that filed the landmark lawsuit against the fraudulent 2020 electors in Wisconsin. Really great having you on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, David. It's great to be here.
So just to get everybody kind of up to speed, we saw attempts at this fake elector scam in a number of different states. Arizona's one place where it made a lot of news. The concept was, even though Joe Biden won, what if we meaning typically some Republicans, what if we just send Republican electors to say we're giving our electoral votes to Donald Trump anyway? That's the gist of it. Is that right?
That is the gist of it. It requires us stepping back and sort of thinking back to Schoolhouse Rock and our basic understanding of civics. We all think that every 4th November we go to the polls and we vote for a candidate for president, right? People say, did you vote for Biden or did you vote for Trump? But in reality, you're voting for a slate of electors who will represent your state in the Electoral College. It is not the popular vote. It is that Electoral College vote that chooses the president. And so what we had was 7 states where, even though the popular vote said that the electors pledged to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would represent that state in the Electoral College, nonetheless, electors who were pledged to Donald Trump and Mike Pence chose to meet and submit papers claiming that they were actually the valid, qualified, and duly elected electors for their state. So in Wisconsin, for example, what that meant was we had 10 individuals, and as you note, they're mostly Republican Party bigwigs, who decided that they knew better than 3.3 million of their neighbors. A record 3.3 million Wisconsinites voted in 2020. And these 10 people decided that they didn't care what those other 3.3 million people thought. They were going to take it upon themselves to hijack Wisconsin's participation in choosing the next president.
Now, when we talk about the January 6th committee, there's an investigation happening in Georgia, et cetera. The question of criminality of some of the different things that were attempted is often brought up. To be clear, you have filed a lawsuit that seeks damages. The criminality question is a different one when it comes to these schemes. Is that right?
That's right. And I do think that at least here under Wisconsin state law and around the country under federal law, I think that there is a likelihood that many of these people committed crimes and could be prosecuted and potentially put in jail. But what we're filing is a civil lawsuit that seeks civil remedies and will be a way of trying to learn more about exactly what did happen here in Wisconsin and how it worked, because a civil lawsuit comes with discovery, the opportunity to see documents, to take depositions and have testimony.
I'm trying to think back. There was this kind of circus tour that went around the country that involved Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and sometimes Sidney Powell and others. Did that circus go through Wisconsin around the same time that the fake elector scam was being kind of conceived?
Well, the circus never came fully to town here in Wisconsin. Rudy Giuliani, for example, to my knowledge, never came to Wisconsin. We did have one of Sidney Powell's Kraken lawsuits that was based in conspiracy theories here in Wisconsin. And what's interesting about that, I mean, there are lots of things that are interesting about that, but one of the things that's interesting about that is the plaintiff that Sidney Powell represented in that lawsuit is one of the fraudulent electors here in Wisconsin. So all of this is tied together. And so the circus came to town through the courts, but it never came to town with the full media entourage.
So in terms of your lawsuit, I mean, what are you alleging? What are the damages? Who was damaged, so to speak?
Sure. So we represent 3 plaintiffs. 2 of them were actually among the valid electors for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Okay.
One of them is a voter who feels strongly that these people tried to disenfranchise her and steal the value of her vote by going against the will of the voters. And what we're doing is we're using some old established common law ideas to try to get at this conduct. Fundamentally, the problem is nobody ever thought that someone would try something as audacious as what these fake electors did in these 7 states. So there is no law that says you can't do that, because we don't pass laws that tell people not to do things that nobody would ever imagine someone would do. And that has led to this challenge of saying, no matter who we talk to, when we explain what the fraudulent electors did, everyone says, oh, that can't be right. That can't be legal. That offends my most basic sense of fair play and civic understanding of democracy.
Right.
But there isn't a specific law. So what we've done is we've taken some very old principles from the common law and said that we think that these fit. So one of them is public nuisance, right? Our election system and our democracy is a finely calibrated and somewhat fragile structure that is for the public good. And there is a longstanding idea that if I take private action that harms the public good, someone can try to stop me using a doctrine that says that I'm creating a nuisance to the public for my own benefit, but everyone else's detriment. So we're using that theory. We're using a theory of civil conspiracy, that these 10 electors, and thus far we've also named 2 lawyers who assisted them, and we might need to add more people as we find out who else was involved, right? The January 6th committee recently made quite clear that Senator Johnson seems to be involved, but that these people conspired to break the law. Whether they ultimately did break the law, right? That's sort of the criminal question. But the fact that they were trying to break the law, that they were trying to convince Congress to take these papers, that in itself we think is actionable. And there is a long standing idea, and I apologize for the Latin, but it goes under the name of quo warranto. This is a writ, an order that you could go to for hundreds of years to courts if you were supposed to serve in a public office, but someone else was occupying that office and keeping you out of it. And so we are bringing a claim for such an order on behalf of the actual electors, that these other people have tried to usurp that office. And by saying, we trump fraudulent electors, we're the real electors, they're implicitly saying that the Biden electors are liars and are not the real electors. And so we're also bringing a claim under that theory.
Have the fraudulent electors had to personally lawyer up as a result of this at this point?
They have. So they've all hired counsel, and we're in those early stages of lawsuits. As you know, David, litigation can be kind of slow.
Yes.
So we're in the early stages of the lawyers sort of maneuvering. We filed in state court. They would rather be federal court, which is not where this case belongs. And so we're in the process of bringing it back to state court.
What kind of damages and restitution are you seeking here?
So we're seeking a number of things. First, we're seeking a clear and unambiguous order from a court that what happened here was improper and unlawful, and it should never happen again. Second, we are seeking an order that would prohibit any of these people from ever being involved with the Electoral College in Wisconsin again, because it seems to me that they have abused the privilege of being part of our civic fabric, and they should not have that opportunity again.
Agreed.
Third, we are seeking deterrence. We want accountability and we want deterrence. We never want to see this happen again. And so we are seeking punitive damages for the fact that these folks deliberately interfered in the legal rights of the real electors. And under Wisconsin law, those punitive damages could be up to $200,000 for each of the defendants.
Have you been in touch with with lawyers that are potentially looking at doing this in other states where these schemes were hatched?
We've certainly had some conversations and some outreach. It is my hope. I really believe that both accountability and deterrence are essential so this doesn't happen again. And so it is my hope that we will see cases like this in all of the states. One
of the big questions is if whoever had followed through on this, like if these electors had gotten on a plane or, whatever the real attempt was, a bona fide attempt, what would have happened? Like, could they have said, no, we believe that Trump gets these votes? And then what would have happened? I mean, John Eastman wrote this memo of what Pence could do. He's now in legal jeopardy himself. He's had to lawyer up. The FBI recently seized his phone. He's got his fair share of problems for even suggesting this framework. But there's this question of like, if they both show up, then what would have happened?
Well, I mean, the reality is we came a lot closer to that than we'd like to think, because I think your intuition that the Electoral College happens in Washington is a common one, but that's actually not right. The Electoral College happens in each state's capital at the same time on the same date. And so when these fraudulent electors met in Madison on December 14th of 2020, and they signed these papers claiming to be the real electors, and when that happened in Arizona and in Georgia and in Michigan and in Nevada and in Pennsylvania and in New Mexico, that was the thing. They submitted these papers.
That's the act, in other words. Like, the real electors did it on that day, and the fake electors did. And then so at that point, but they've both done it.
That's absolutely right. And it really all came down to then Vice President Pence. If he had followed John Eastman's wishes and been willing to credit those votes, then we would have seen chaos. We would have seen how Congress reacted. We would have seen almost certainly litigation, but we really would have been in a constitutional crisis. It is to Mr. Pence's credit that he refused to go along with that and recognize that in our democracy, the will of the voters really is sacrosanct.
Yeah, Tom Hartman, radio host Tom Hartman, has an interesting Twitter thread from in the last week, it might be a few days ago, where he kind of outlines what this could look like in 2024, with the difference that there is a move to accept different electors, and that although we all intuitively know that's not right, it's not what's supposed to happen, it would be a violation of the will of the people, all of the things that you've said, it's not so cut and dry that it obviously fails, that it could get pretty complicated and dicey for a period of time.
It absolutely could. And one of the ways that could happen is if state courts that support the losing candidate wanted to sort of muddy the waters. In Wisconsin, for example, we had a partial recount. President Trump's campaign asked for a recount in the Madison area and Milwaukee. And then when they didn't like the results of that recount, because it actually showed that Biden won by more votes, they filed a lawsuit, as they're entitled to do, to challenge the results of the recount. And that case went up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The Wisconsin Supreme Court took unprecedented actions. I don't think this had ever happened before. The case came in on a Friday afternoon. The Electoral College was meeting on Monday at noon, and that's a statutory deadline. And so the court had people brief late at night on Friday night. They held oral argument by Zoom on Saturday, and they issued a full opinion with all of its reasoning and everything on Monday morning, so that they would have given the final word on the election results in Wisconsin before the Electoral College met. But imagine, I mean, Mr. Eastman's arguments would be much stronger if the court had not done that. If there was still a question about who the legal winner in a state was, then there is a much better argument for these dueling slates. And you really have questions then about how Congress is supposed to resolve this or what they're supposed to do. So we could, with what we've learned from 2020, we could imagine in 2024 a number of actors making specific decisions to try to leave more flexibility for Congress or the vice president, or make this uglier and harder in ways that are really, really dangerous to our democracy.
Very, very scary. But one piece of what is being done is this lawsuit. And we've been speaking with Jeffrey Mandell, president and lead counsel at Law Forward. Thanks so much for talking to me today and explaining what you're doing.
Thanks, David, for having me. It's a pleasure. I appreciate your attention to this, and hope we can come back and update you as it moves forward.